could not decide which lane it wanted to be in. Just like that, if the video title wasn't what it is, that would bring on 10 different comments asking what I just did. So this has been on my list of topics to vlog about for a long time, just because I think the vast majority of the people who subscribe to the channel have not seen the video that I made quite a while ago, back on my R6, about clutchless shifting. And I was reminded by the fact that I wanted to make a video about this because Yammie Noob, another motovlogger, just put out a video talking about clutchless shifting versus quickshifter. So if you got a minute after watching this, feel free to head over to his video. I'll have it linked into the description. But he has a quickshifter on his motorcycle. I can't remember what bike he has. I think he has a Triumph 675R. I could be wrong. But his bike comes with a quickshifter. And so I thought I'd come at it a little bit different perspective as someone who does not have a quickshifter. I know a lot of this. Whoa, crap! Whoa, whoa! Oh, road construction. They repave these roads and they leave them crappy for months and months and months. Friggin' danger zone right there. So a lot of the times when it's brought up, when someone leaves a comment asking, wait, how is he shifting without pulling in the clutch? Someone will reply and say that I have a quick shifter. But I don't. I do not have a quick shifter. It's all clutchless shifted. And if you're not familiar with it, you may think either that it's impossible, that it's incredibly damaging to your bike, or you just may have not heard about it at all. So what is clutchless shifting? Well, it's simply shifting without using the clutch. Here, I'll give you an example. So I'm just gonna leave my left hand off of here. And that was a clutchless shift. And there's really only certain situations that I do it. You'll notice that typically I don't clutchless shift unless I'm under hard acceleration. And the reason for that is it just doesn't work as well. It's not as smooth, you could say, for the shifts. So when I'm under hard acceleration, like this, well, I'm in 6th gear, so I won't be able to shift. When I'm under hard acceleration, or just relative acceleration, I'll have, and I have GP shift, so I actually press down to shift up, and there's a red light. So when I'm under acceleration, and I typically also don't do it between 1st and 2nd gear, unless I'm like racing up through 1st gear. And the reason for that is because the difference in RPMs from 1st to 2nd is pretty wide, whereas in the higher gears, it's not that wide of a difference. And the reason that matters is because when you clutchless shift, you're chopping your throttle in order to deload the engine. Basically, take off any load, take off the torque that's currently on the gearbox from your acceleration. And that quick chop throttle takes off that pressure on the teeth of the gear that you're currently in to make it very easy for the gearbox to actually move on to the next gear. And understanding this is actually a little bit easier if you understand how motorcycle gearboxes work. So I'm going to go ahead and drop in a couple links to a good couple videos. One of them is not a motorcycle gearbox, but it's a constant mesh gearbox, which is what a motorcycle is. And what constant mesh means is just that all the gears are constantly turning. They're all turning together. It's just that you're not on every gear at the same time. I'm not sure what the exact piece is called, but there's a piece on the shaft that slides into the inner slots on each gear sprocket in order to make that sprocket turn. The second video that I'll show is actually from a motorcycle gearbox. Not as much explanation, but it's great quality and it's actually showing you a motorcycle gearbox. But that way you can actually see what's happening in the gearbox. Obviously it's not showing what happens in the situation of clutchless shifting, but it allows you to understand it a little bit better. So think about it this way. If you're in a car, if you're really accelerating fast, like you're in a Ferrari and you got that thing at full throttle, you're planted into the back of that seat and it's hard for you to move, right? It'd be hard for you to actually like get up. The same kind of concept is happening when a gearbox for your motorcycle is under acceleration. those teeth are under more pressure. And when you chop the throttle, it takes off that load and makes it easier for that piece on the shaft to move off of that current gear and onto the second gear. So to bring in a little info about quick shifters, with clutchless shifting, that chop throttle is essentially mimicking what a quick shifter will do. There's different quick shifters that work in slightly different ways, but what they're all trying to accomplish is taking off that load on the engine. Some do it by cutting the ignition, some do it by cutting fuel to the engine. However they work, they're trying to accomplish the same thing, just taking that load off. So in this Ferrari example, if you're under hard acceleration, you're planted in the seat, you can't move very well, driver goes off the throttle, you're not planted in that seat anymore. It's easier for you to move. Same thing with the gearbox. When you chop the throttle, or when a quick shifter cuts the ignition, it takes off that pressure, makes it easier for it to move to the second gear. Now there's a little bit something that I do when I quick shift, and that is preloading the gear lever, what your foot's on. And what I mean by preloading, I mean just putting a little bit of pressure on that gear lever. Some people say that this is causing damage, but you're really not putting a lot of pressure on this. What I think people think is happening is that when you're preloading the engine, it's like catching onto the next gear and you're just grinding down that little piece, but that's not actually happening. And if you watch the video on how a motorcycle gearbox works, you'll see that it's not actually on the next gear. What you're doing though is you're encouraging that little piece to move off of the gear that it's in. But since it's currently under pressure, it doesn't want to move off of that gear. It doesn't want to move off of that sprocket, so it keeps turning that sprocket. But what happens when you have slight preload on that gear lever is that when you chop the throttle, you're releasing that pressure, and then that piece is like, oh, well, I got no pressure to stay on this gear anymore. I'm going to move in the direction that the preload was already going to. So in my case, I'm in 5th gear, and I'm preloading to shift to 6th gear. That just means like I'm getting ready. I got maybe 2 pounds of pressure on that gear lever, so that when I cut this throttle here, and I'll give you a little bit example, it basically just wants to move to the next gear without me putting any more pressure on that gear lever. So I'll move over here, and I'm gonna preload, so I got my foot on the gear lever. I don't know if you guys can see that. I'm just putting a little bit of pressure on that, so that when I accelerate, and then I chop the throttle, it moves down without me putting almost any more pressure on that gear lever. And that just increases both the speed and the smoothness that you can do the clutchless shift with. So when I'm saying chop the throttle, what I'm implying with that statement is that you're gonna go off the throttle a little bit and right back on it after you complete the press of the shift lever. It's all pretty much instantaneous, so you're just going like this, but that back on throttle is happening right after you press the lever. And the reason that you got to go right back on the throttle is that to make clutchless shifting a seamless and non-damaging action, you have to go back on that throttle so you can match that RPM. It's basically like rev matching in a sports car. You're trying to make a seamless shift between one gear and the next one by putting the engine at the speed that the gearbox is going to be at for that next gear. And as I mentioned before, the reason that it works a lot better in higher gears, that rev difference is a lot smaller between higher gear changes than it is at lower gear changes. But yeah, if done correctly, clutchless shifting is really not damaging to the engine. I'd actually say that it's less damaging than clunky high acceleration shifting using the clutch, because when you're using the clutch, and the reason that you do use the clutch is for greater control. You can better ease the clutch out and roll back onto the throttle. But when you're doing that, you're just making this process so much longer in moving all of those pieces in the engine and the gearbox together into the position that they're going to be in. The longer they're doing that, the more damage they can cause to each other. So with clutchless shifting, if you're doing things correctly, you know, you're getting back on the throttle, trying to rev match as best as possible, that's happening so quickly that there's really no time for like the teeth to clip on each other. Now, I started clutchless shifting back when I had my R6. At least I believe I started doing it with my R6. I might have done it earlier back on my SV, but I honestly can't remember. The fact of the matter is, I've had my R1 for almost 3.5 years, and I've been clutchless shifting on a regular basis on this thing since the day that I got it. And it still shifts just as well since that day. Obviously, I can't prove that to you unless I take it apart and show you the gears, but I'd wager everything's fine and dandy and working great. Now, I wouldn't encourage new riders to go out and start clutchless shifting on their bikes, but if you've been riding for a while, you're comfortable shifting, riding is second nature for you, and you haven't tried clutchless shifting before, I would recommend it. I think it's a valuable skill to learn, helps you better understand what your engine is doing, and it allows you to make smoother shifts on your bike. And the advantages don't just come from the shifting aspect of it. If you're shifting in a normal method, it's taking a little bit longer, and so what happens when you pull that clutch in, that acceleration stops for longer than it would with a clutchless shift, and so your weight on the bike changes. So like I come off the throttle and I go forward a little bit like that. It happens even more the more acceleration that I'm under. If you're doing that shift much faster, there's very little weight change in your bike because you're basically under acceleration the whole time. Now I say all of this talking about upshifting. Downshifting is a completely different story, and while it can be done, it's not really recommended. So when you're upshifting, you're under acceleration, there's a load on the engine, you trap the throttle, and that takes off that load. When you're downshifting, you're under deceleration. The engine braking is currently in effect, so the load is in the opposite direction. You don't really have a chop effect. What you have is a blip of the throttle. So instead of chopping the throttle, you're going on the throttle. Now this gets a little iffy because it's a lot easier to just chop the throttle a little bit, but with downshifting, you gotta make sure that you're blipping the throttle like the perfect amount to get that rev match right, to take off that engine braking load, but not so much that you're like suddenly accelerating your bike. Now these quick shifters that have downshifting essentially do that whole process for you. They do that rev matching. It's just a much more difficult process if you're trying to downshift, and that's when you actually can cause problems. But clutchless upshifting, it takes just a few minutes to get comfortable with it. Obviously it's going to take time to perfect it, for it to become a habit, but it's really not damaging, and it's pretty easy. So I hope this video was valuable to you guys. Again, save it for the higher gears if you're really worried about something. It's not even that fun doing it in lower gears unless you're under like super hard acceleration. If you're super worried, just get a quick shifter. But that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll get a couple runs in here so I can show you some more examples. But that's going to be it for the day. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Remember, videos every Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. Hit that subscribe button if you're not subbed already, and that like button if this video helped you out. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Trying to hide all these wires.
Oh, would you look at that?
Look at that.
Would you look at that?
That's a perfect fit.